The 2024 FIDE Candidates kicked off today in Toronto, Canada, as 8 of the world's best players began their campaign to qualify for the next World Championship. Now, the format is a 14-round double round robin, meaning all 8 players will play every other player in the tournament twice, once with each color. The winner earns the right to face current FIDE World Champion Ding Liren in the upcoming FIDE World Championship match that's to take place later this year. Also taking place side by side with the FIDE Candidates for the first time ever is the 2024 FIDE Women's Candidates with the exact same format, slightly shorter time control, and again the winner going on to face the current Women's World Champion Ju Wenjun in the next Women's World Chess Championship match. In today's first round, all 4 games in the FIDE Candidates were drawn, some with tremendous fight, as we'll soon see, while on the women's side, only Grandmaster Tan Zhongyi was able to score a decisive point, defeating fellow Grandmaster Lei Tingjie with the black pieces. Moving on to the games, the biggest matchup of the day was undoubtedly between Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura, 2 of the top seeds in the event. Now, the way these events work, because they are so serious, what they often do is they pair players from the same federation in the first round so that there's no sense of cheating or collusion later on whatsoever. Now, this first game was quite big, with Fabi taking the white pieces, and it started off as an open Sicilian, and Nakamura surprised pretty much everyone with this move e5. This is an older move, and the problem with this one is, as Fabi plays, it allows bishop to b5 check. It's for this reason that the Najdorf has become such a popular opening over the last 50, 60 years. e5, definitely a blast from the past, caught Fabi off guard. Nevertheless, he still managed to get quite a reasonable position out of the opening, despite spending lots of time. Naka was, of course, blitzing his moves out quite quickly, indicating that he was in prep for quite some time. And the players ended up reaching a middle game with opposite colored bishops. After this move e4 from Naka, Fabi took this pawn on e4, knight takes e4, rook e1, winning the piece back. Black castled, rook e4, bishop b2. Rook b1, bishop f6, and queen to d5. And it was probably around here that Naka's preparation ended. This is where he started spending some time. And although the position is close to equal, it definitely felt like white is the one that's pushing for 2 results here, with the better bishop in this middle game with opposite color bishops. Now, Fabi did get a chance in this game to get an advantage. After Naka plays this sequence with d5, bishop to c3, and rook takes b5, Nakamura sacrificed a pawn here in order to follow up with rook takes f2. Very surprising rook sacrifice. Point being, after king takes f2, black has queen to h4 check, king to g1, bishop to d4 check. You can't take the bishop because of queen e1 mate. And after king h1, bishop e5, black has enough for a draw. However, Fabi, instead of taking the rook immediately, goes rook takes d5. He grabs this pawn. Naka goes queen h4, and now queen to d3. So this allowed white to keep an extra pawn in the position, but it was very difficult for Fabi to really squeeze this one. After rook to f6, g3, queen to b4. There was a couple of good options here. After king to g2, bishop to b2, white can play moves like a4 or rook to b1, and he would keep a pretty sizable advantage. In fact, possibly some real winning chances. But with not a lot of time on the clock, and in this tournament there is no increment before move 40, so flagging is a real concern, Fabi decided to play it safe here with the move rook to f5, allowing a trade of rooks, but this simply simplified Nakamura's defensive task, and from here Hikaru was able to hold this one pretty solidly. a4, king g7, a5, rook a8. Very nice move here. If white were to take this rook on a8, then black would have queen e2 check, winning back the rook on d1. Instead, rook d5 was played, rook a7, and black ended up picking up this pawn on a5. But after takes, queen to b7, Fabi was able to go after the f7 pawn and keep his extra pawn. However, in this endgame, there was really not much for white to play for. Black is just way too solid with the opposite color bishops. And after queen c4, queen e3, the players agreed to a draw. Moving on to the game between Alireza Firouzja and Praggnanandhaa, one of the top Indian juniors. This one was very, very exciting. It started off as an open Spanish Quite a combative opening, very, very trendy at the top level these days. And Firouzja definitely took quite a tremendous risk in this game. First, he allows Prague here to capture on f3, weakening White's pawns, and leaving himself with a lot of weaknesses in the long run in exchange for having this strong light-squared bishop. The position was extremely double-edged, and it's hard to say even which side was better here, both sides having their trumps. I think around here, instead of queen e2, queen e3 was pointed out as possibly being a stronger move. The game was very interesting. Queen e2, f5. Prague here starts playing on the king side and looking to cause some grief to White's king. This move, rook h6, threatening, of course, the mate on h2. f3 was played, and this was a case where really both sides had to play very, very precisely not to allow the other some kind of serious opportunity. The game ended up heating up quite a bit just before the first time control was reached. At this point, Prague goes rook h6, once again hammering down on that h2 pawn. Rook e2 was played. And now after rook h3, Firouzja found this very tricky move, queen e1, inviting Prague to take this pawn on f3. Prague does take the pawn. Firouzja then immediately responded with the move knight to c5. And at this point, this is move 30. Both players are getting into time pressure. Again, no increment until move 40. Firouzja here only having a couple minutes left when he played this move knight to c5. But this was very strong. If knight takes c5, then there's rook e8 check, and black is losing the queen. So instead, Prague played this move queen to h5, hitting the rook on g4. Now the engine points out this move rook eg2 would have been quite strong for White, simply defending the rook and leaving the knight on e6 under attack. The problem for Black is Black still can't take on c5 because if rook takes g7 check, be very, very dangerous for Black's king. In fact, immediately bad. So this would have put tremendous pressure on Prague. However, Firouzja didn't find this one. Instead, he takes on e6. And after queen takes g4, knight to g5, White is threatening the rook, as well as, of course, the immediate mate with rook to e8. But here, Prague found the absolutely brilliant resource, knight to e5. Just a phenomenal move. Plugging the e-file. If White takes, then all the play on the e-file is blocked. The knight is hanging, and Black is doing absolutely fine. After rook takes e5, this was Prague's real idea. Rook takes h2 was the follow-up. So first he sacrifices the knight, now he's sacrificing the rook. And the point is after king takes h2, queen h5 check, Black has a perpetual here and is making the draw. And in fact, the players did repeat after queen g4, king h1, queen h5, and so on. Moving on to the game between Gitesh and Vidit. This one was also quite exciting, although it ended up having an abrupt finish. Gitesh started playing very, very creatively in this one early on, starting with this move rook a2, bringing the rook to the d-file. But this was incredibly ambitious, and after natural play by Vidit, Vidit was able to get a ton of counterplay here with this move a5. Gitesh takes on d5 at this point. The engine was pointing out a b4 here for Black would have led to Black's advantage. So Vidit plays it a little bit safer here with this move e5. However, the game still remained extremely complicated. Knight b5 was the continuation, a b4, knight takes d6, queen takes d6, takes, and queen takes b4. And this position looked very, very shaky for White. Here Gitesh played the move queen to c2, as White's king is stuck in the center, and it feels like Black is just about to get the attack going. Black had a couple of interesting opportunities here. For example, rook to e8, knight takes d5 as well. But Vidit comes up with an absolute shocker, bishop to g4. The idea being if you take this bishop, then Black's play is just way too strong after rook fc8, queen d1, and rook a2. And White is just not getting out here. This is completely winning for Black. Rook takes b2 is in the air, knight e4, and yeah, it's just game over. However, fortunately for Gitesh, he was able to save this one, the very clutch resource, bishop to c3. Probably Vidit had anticipated that this would happen. He had the move queen a3 in mind. White still can't take the bishop on g4 without getting into huge trouble, but he can repeat the position with bishop to b2. And neither side, unfortunately, had anything better than to just repeat moves here, and this game ended up in a draw as well. The last game between Basov and Jan Nepomniachtchi, this one was not super interesting. The players got a very classic IQP position out of the middle game. And here, after rook c1, b5, bishop b3, bishop to b7, Basov made a practical decision and decided to basically liquidate everything with the move bishop takes f6, followed by d5. Probably this was the exact moment to do it, as black was ready to play knight to b4 and seize control over the d5 square, after which white might start to feel themselves under a bit of pressure. However, after the trades and d5, takes, all the pieces came off, knight a5, and the players essentially ended up in a very drawish endgame. They traded everything off down to the rooks, and of course the game was soon drawn. Moving over to the women's candidates, the only decisive game of the day was this one between Chinese grandmasters Lei Tingjie and Tan Zhongyi. And after a pretty solid opening, the players ended up reaching a very classic Carlsbad structure. This one is generally considered slightly better for white, but with black having very reasonable play. After the opening phase, they ended up trading a lot of pieces here. Knight takes c5, queen c5, and here Tan starts playing on the king side with this move rook to e6. Takes, rook g6, bishop f3, bc, queen a5, and here black's counterplay started with this move h5, intending bishop to g4, which is a very difficult move for white to deal with because hg leaves white's king in heavy trouble on the h-file. Queen c7 was played, queen h4, and here Lei probably makes her first serious mistake of the game with this move queen to f4. She was likely worried about ideas like bishop takes h3, as well as bishop a6. However, there wasn't a ton to fear here for white. The engine points out rook ac1 is totally fine. One of the ideas being that if bishop takes h3, there's queen h2 in the position, and black doesn't have anything special here and is in danger of losing material. Instead, however, queen f4 was played, and after queen to f4, black is able to take and go rook to f6, and white has issues with their pawns. Rook e1 was played, king f8, rook c1, g6, king h2. Black takes on f4 finally, rook c6, rook takes d4, and Tan here was able to end up with an extra pawn. Rook d1 was played, the players traded rooks. Black goes a5, and black's conversion here, I would say, was quite nice. King e7, rook to b8. Black activates the rook and trades this a-pawn for white's f-pawn. Now, it wasn't clear how exactly black was going to win this game, but black ends up finding a very, very nice plan. After rook to h1, king to g3, this was probably the decisive mistake of the game. What white needed to do was take on d5, allow black to take on h4, and then go king to g3. And eventually white would be able to take on e6 here, get into a rook endgame, a pawn down, but one that would at least provide some serious drawing chances. Instead, after rook h1 and king to g3, white's king here ends up very passive, and black finds a very nice idea to activate the king, bringing the king all the way to e3. Now, what's the point here? The point is not necessarily to run the d-pawn, although this is, of course, always a big plan, but rather the threat is now g5, where if white takes on g5, then h4 is mate on the board. So that was the power of bringing the king all the way to e3. Black can now threaten a mate against white's king, and here it was simply all over. Lei tried rook to e8, g5, and rook takes e6 in order to get out of the mating net, but this endgame was simply lost for white, with black having an extra exchange. Black was able to convert this one quite smoothly. And with that, Tan Zhongyi was able to pick up the first win of the tournament in either section and take a lead going into round 2. Tomorrow we'll see the second round as the most important chess tournament of the year continues. And of course, I will be back for another recap. Thanks so much for watching, folks. And until next time, take care.